I'm a missionary from Alabama. I'm located in South Dakota, and I guess I was just wondering. It's kind of interesting how God's laid out my life between my first year was full-time ministry, last year was full-time working, and I'm at a crossroads now trying to balance the two. What's the balance between ministry and work life and providing for yourself? And I'm at the point where I want to grow a family.
Yeah, Dalton, that's a great question. And I find myself like that, as many other. We know Paul had a tent-making ministry that he did. We'll talk more about this on the other side of the break. When we went to the break, we were speaking with Dalton in Alabama, now becoming more and more involved in the ministry of the gospel. Between being a pastor and working day to day, really, Timothy, I think you probably have some pretty good insight on that. Your thoughts?
Yes. Well, Dalton, first of all, I commend you for your work in the gospel. We
Amen.
need more men like you to step up and to minister. And so the question of how do you balance it? When you find the answer, let me know. Just kidding. It's hard. I'll tell you a little bit of my story. I currently have 6 children, ages 12 all the way down to a newborn 2 months old. And so this is a question I have to constantly answer myself, Dalton, of how do I balance, God, church, family, et cetera. So I'll try to give you a little bit what goes through my mind through the scriptures. First of all, Jesus has to be at the center of your life. It's good to say put God first, but it's even better to say put him at the center, because if he's first, it's easy for him to go down the rung to second or third as the week goes on. But if he's center, if you move him out of the center, your whole life falls apart. So Dalton, I'm preaching to a preacher, but Jesus stays at the center. Now, what comes next? After God and Christ being at the center, then comes your family. Your family is your first ministry. And if you don't minister to them, if you don't succeed at home, it doesn't matter how successful your other ministry is. And I want to read you a scripture that comes to mind. It's 1 Timothy 5:8. It says, if anyone does not provide for his own family, and especially of those of his own household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Now, Dalton, when I hear that, I'm like, wow. So as the husband, if you have kids, it's like your job is to provide for your wife and family. So that's number one. So how to balance, you're talking about part-time, full-time. I would just say, make sure our home is taken care of first. And then after that, as the ministry grows, kind of the goal for most pastors is that if the Lord allows you to become full-time in a church or ministry, it's a blessing. If not, there are many church pastors that are bivocational, and it's always a challenge to balance it, ministering to them. But I would just encourage you to love on that wife. If you have children, love on them. And as God grows that ministry, there may come a day where you can devote yourself full time. And if not, then, it's home first and then the church next. I hope that helps. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I agree. And I, for many years, did body and fender work while I was a pastor of a church. And I really didn't want to take any money from the church. I didn't mind working. And so I really tried as long as I could to just stay in the workforce, because it put me in touch with people I was working with that I witnessed to. I have people in this church today and families that I ministered to when I was working in doing shop work. Still with us this very day, 40 years later, still here in the church. I thought, well, if I had just always been a pastor, I would have never met them, and they wouldn't be here today. So I just really thank God for the whether I'm with people or not, because when you're in the workforce, it keeps you in touch with where they're at as well. I think a lot of times pastors get into their little ivory towers and they forget what it's like to work in a hot, sweaty, shop, and people cussing, and there's no such thing as just a hammer. It's got a lot of explicitives with it, and people cussing and swearing, and nudie pictures in the men's bathroom, and the talk around the water cooler. I think a lot of ministers lose touch with with who they're trying to minister to. And so I don't think necessarily it's a bad thing. I think it's a balance thing. And what caused me to finally leave that occupation was I was so busy visiting. I was getting more calls to talk to me at my business. Back then we didn't have cell phones, but more calls where people wanted me to come up and see them in the hospital or whatever, that finally they said, well, Mike, you're getting so many calls here, it's not good. And I said, you're right. And so I quit. And that's what happened. I let them bring the point to me that, hey, Mike, you're so busy with your ministry, you're not here. Now, I never took anything. I was always on commission, so I never took anything from them. I don't think it's right for your business to pay for your evangelism. I never thought that was a right thing. But when you're on commission, the faster you work, the more diligent you work, the more money you make. And I just found that it was making it very difficult to do both things. And so that's what actually terminated my employment with the world. But I've been busy ever since. So Dalton, I hope that helps.